On day 48, students will begin Task 5, Extreme Living Solutions. After deciding on a type of product to create, students will use their investigations from Task 4 and any additional research they gather to build and test a product that minimizes or maximizes thermal energy transfer. They'll need to build and test a prototype of the product they design. To start, students will first brainstorm ideas for products. Beginning individually, then transitioning into groups, students will use their prior knowledge of heat regulation devices, temperature, and heat transfer to brainstorm potential ideas for a product. Students often have difficulty getting started, so have them begin by first thinking of devices and products they already use to preserve heat or cool down in their own homes. Air conditioners, fans, refrigerators, insulated drink and food containers, blankets. Once students start to come up with a list, they'll likely have an easier time adding to it. However, we don't live in an extreme climate region. We want students to make the shift from thinking about what they need here in New York to what other people might need who live in extreme climate regions. What might a person living in the Sahara need to maintain a cool temperature? What about someone living inside the Arctic Circle? How might the products and devices they use differ from the ones that we use? To keep track of their ideas during brainstorming, students should use a virtual design board in their student handouts. Let's go through the pages that students will use on day 48 and day 49 to organize the ideas that they came up with during their individual brainstorm as well as in their project groups. Remind students that their goal is not to create a product for themselves, but rather for people who live in a region with extreme temperatures. Students will probably need to go back to their project organizer to review which region they chose to use for the culminating unit project. Ask students to imagine the region they selected for their culminating projects and consider the following questions to begin their brainstorming. What kinds of products might make the temperature conditions more comfortable for people living there? It's not just about basic survival. It can also be about general comfort or just making life easier. After coming up with some ideas, students should connect them to the concepts they investigated in Task 4. How do the products use ideas of temperature change or heat transfer? Do they enhance or reduce conduction, convection, or radiation? How do they demonstrate that thermal energy moves from areas of hotter temperature to areas of lower temperature? Next, students will use Google Drawings to create a design board, basically like a digital bulletin board with post-it notes for ideas. This will allow students to first write down as many ideas as they can, then organize them later. By double-clicking on the image of the bulletin board on the next page of the student handout, students can edit the board and add their own ideas. First, delete the images of the post-it notes and add text boxes for new ideas of products that will make life more comfortable for people living in the chosen region. This is brainstorming mode, so don't be afraid to think outside the box. Any idea is a good idea at this point. Next, change the background color of text boxes with ideas for products that use concepts about temperature and thermal energy transfer. Drag and drop those ideas onto the right-hand side of the design board. These are the ideas that will be shared in groups the next day. The following day, on day 49, students will transition into groups to further brainstorm and organize their ideas. The goal on this day is to share, clarify, and select ideas. Now that students have gathered ideas individually, they can combine forces and help each other judge which ideas will be the best to pursue further. Students will use Google Jamboard to create their group design boards. The previous day, students used Google Drawing to create an individual design board of their ideas. Jamboard is a collaborative version of this, bringing together the flexibility of Google Drawing with the collaboration of Google Docs. With a Jamboard, all group members can easily access and modify the board. Jamboard is easier to use than Google Slides because it has a limited array of editing options, but these options are more than sufficient for a group design board. Here's how it works. To the left, there's a pen feature, which you can also change to a highlighter or marker, and you can change the colors. The eraser feature. The cursor just lets you select different items that are already on the screen. You can add post-its, like sticky notes in different colors, which are basically just text boxes that resize text when you resize the box. You can also add images, either from your own device by uploading them or by doing a Google image search. You can add simple shapes. You can also color them, text box, and a laser pointer, which is helpful for presenting. First, if the title isn't there already, have students add a text box at the top that says Group Design Board. Then, students will need to go back to their handouts and look at the ideas they brainstormed the previous day. Specifically, students should identify the product ideas they came up with that use concepts about temperature and thermal energy transfer, the concepts they investigated in Task 4. So remember, students should have moved those ideas to the side of their personal design boards, separating them from the rest of the ideas. Now, students will use the sticky note feature in Jamboard to add their ideas to their group design board. When adding a sticky note, students can choose a color and then type text. It may be helpful for groups to designate a different color for each group member as a way of keeping track of ideas. It will also help you as their teacher to make sure that all group members are contributing ideas. Resizing sticky notes is easy and automatically resizes the text inside as well. Once everyone has shared and added their ideas, read and discuss them to identify which ideas might be best to create for people living in the chosen climate region. Use the pen tool to draw a star next to those best ideas. You can also use the shapes, like adding an arrow to point at them, however you'd like to do it. Next, click the right arrow at the top of the screen to move to the second frame or create another frame. Think about the products that each group member has shared and the limitations that people in the chosen climate regions may have to using them. Create a sticky note for each idea and list its limitations on it. For example, depending on where they live, people may have limited access to certain materials or electricity. List on or move ideas to the right side of the board that have no limitations or limitations that can be overcome through modifications. For example, a heater might be modified from using electricity provided by a power grid to one that is solar powered. Finally, as a group, decide together on the best product idea to design a prototype of. Consider materials you have access to, your knowledge and skill levels, cost, and how realistic your idea actually is. Remember, the next steps are to draw a design of your product, then actually build a prototype to test. Keep that in mind when choosing which ideas to pursue further. Be sure to write down your chosen idea in your student handout. It may also be helpful to add a link to the group's Jamboard in the student handout so it's easy to access later on. As a teacher, be sure to keep a list of Jamboard links that student groups are using so you can review their chosen ideas. Make sure that they're choosing ideas with either few limitations or limitations that can actually be overcome through realistic modifications.